The mistake wasn't throwing me the keys. It was assuming I'd pick them up. You see, there's this moment when someone tosses something at you, not to you, at you, and they expect you to catch it like a trained dog. Like your reflexes exist solely for their convenience. The keys hit the concrete with that sharp metallic sound that cuts through morning air, and I just stood there, watched them bounce once, twice, then settle against the curb like discarded thoughts. He was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear, talking about quarterly projections or weekend plans or whatever fills the empty spaces in lives built on other people's labor. I knew in that instant that everything was about to change. Not because of the keys, hell, I'd been picking up, after entitled children masquerading as adults for 3 years, but because of what came next, the casual dismissal, the assumption that I'd scramble to retrieve his property like it was some kind of favor he was doing me, the way he never even looked back to see if I complied. That's when I realized he had no idea who I actually was. The morning started like every other morning for the past 18 months. 5:30 alarm, black coffee that tastes like disappointment, drive to campus while the world still belongs, to janitors and security guards and people who make things work before anyone else wakes up. I parked in the service lot behind Whitman Hall, pulled on my work gloves, and began the ritual of making an elite institution look effortless. You wouldn't recognize me if you saw me in my real life. Designer clothes, corner office, business cards with impressive titles that make people lean forward when I hand them over. But here, in steel-toed boots and university-issued polo shirts, I become invisible. A ghost in plain sight, moving through spaces where real decisions get made, where power players reveal who they really are when they think nobody important is watching. I chose this invisibility, needed it, actually. After the divorce, after the career implosion, after discovering that everything I'd built could be dismantled by men who thought my silence was consent rather than strategy, sometimes you have to disappear completely to figure out how the world actually works. Sometimes you have to clean up other people's messes to understand the architecture of your own destruction. The physical work felt good at first, honest in ways that boardroom politics never were. Sweeping walkways, maintaining common areas, keeping the machinery of education running smoothly while professors and students floated through their intellectual bubbles, untethered from the reality of who actually makes their comfortable world possible. But invisibility has a price. When you're invisible, people forget you have eyes. They forget you have ears. They forget you have a memory that catalogs every careless word, every casual cruelty, every moment when they reveal the contempt they hold for anyone they may perceive as beneath them. He was the worst of them. Not evil, that would have been easier to process. Just casually, reflexively indifferent to the humanity of anyone who couldn't advance his agenda or reflect his status. The kind of man who treats service workers like NPCs in his personal video game. Present when needed, invisible otherwise, reset to factory settings each morning, regardless of yesterday's interactions. I watched him for months before the key incident, watched him leave coffee cups on benches for other people to clean up, watched him take phone calls in quiet study areas, voice pitched just loud enough to make sure everyone knew he was conducting important business. Watched him mansplain campus policies to administrative staff who'd been implementing those policies since before he learned to tie his shoes. The pattern was always the same: mild disrespect escalating to casual cruelty, then forgetting it ever happened. Like a man who kicks dogs not out of hatred, but out of unconscious assumption that dogs exist for kicking, he'd commandeer outdoor tables during lunch hours, spreading his laptop and papers across surfaces meant for groups, then act mystified when students hovered nearby looking for somewhere to sit. He'd interrupt conversations between grounds crew, asking pointed questions about timelines and efficiency, like he was conducting impromptu performance reviews for people who didn't report to him. Every interaction carried the same subtext: I belong here, you're just visiting. My time matters, yours is negotiable. My comfort takes precedence over your dignity. The day he started playing music from his phone during quiet study hours, I knew we were approaching a breaking point. Not because the music was particularly offensive, some generic indie playlist designed to signal sophisticated taste, but because of the deliberate nature of it. He could have used headphones, could have found a different space. Instead, he chose to colonize shared silence, to make his preferences everyone else's ambient reality. When a student politely asked him to lower the volume, he responded with that particular smile wealthy men reserve for people they're about to educate about their own insignificance. It's not that loud, he said, not looking up from his screen. Maybe find somewhere else if it's bothering you. The student left. Everyone left. One by one, the area emptied until he sat alone in his manufactured solitude, perfectly satisfied with his conquest of communal space. I kept sweeping, kept watching, kept adding details to a mental file I didn't yet know I was building. The escalation was subtle but consistent. Longer occupations of shared resources, louder phone conversations in designated quiet zones, more elaborate claims on territory that belonged to everyone and therefore, in his mind, to him specifically. He started leaving personal items unattended. Jacket draped over chairs, laptop bag claiming entire, benches like territorial markers in spaces where students paid thousands of dollars for the privilege of access. When anyone moved his belongings to make room, he'd return with theatrical frustration, sighing and shaking his head like the victim of some profound injustice. The complaints started reaching my supervisor around the 3-week mark. Nothing specific enough to warrant intervention, just a growing chorus of students and staff mentioning that guy who seemed to think campus policies were suggestions rather than requirements. I could have spoken up then, could have documented the behavior, filed reports, initiated the formal processes designed to address exactly this kind of entitled colonization. Instead, I stayed quiet, kept cleaning around his expanding presence, watching the ripple effects of unchecked arrogance spread through spaces that were supposed to belong to everyone. Why did I wait? Why did I let it continue when I had the power to stop it? Because I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Because complaints and reports can be disputed, minimized, explained away by people who understand the language of institutional politics. Because men like him have been training their entire lives to defend against direct challenges to their authority. But they've never learned to defend against being ignored. The morning he threw the keys, I'd been watching him for almost 2 months. I knew his patterns better than he knew them himself. I knew he arrived at 7:15 every Tuesday and Thursday. I knew he preferred the northwest corner tables with the best Wi-Fi signal and most privacy from foot traffic. I knew he ordered the same overpriced coffee and spent exactly 45 minutes each session, spread across surfaces designed for 4 people while he conducted business that could have been handled anywhere. More importantly, I knew something he'd forgotten, something buried in the stack of documents he'd signed when he first requested access to the private outdoor workspace areas. Something that gave him the privilege of using premium campus facilities during specified hours under specific conditions, terms and conditions he'd agreed to follow, behavioral standards he'd committed to maintaining, consequences for violations that would be enforced at the discretion of facilities management. Facilities management. The department where I'd been quietly building relationships, earning trust, and demonstrating competence for 18 months. The department whose authority superseded his academic credentials, his professional network, and his assumptions about who held real power in institutional settings. The keys bounced against concrete like dice in a game he didn't know he was playing. I left them there. When he returned 20 minutes later, expecting to find Etanio his property retrieved and his dominance confirmed, the keys were exactly where gravity and momentum had deposited them. He stood there for a long moment, probably running through the calculation for the first time. Bend down and pick them up himself, or acknowledge that his authority hadn't extended as far as he'd assumed. He chose option 3, escalation. "Hey," he called across the space, voice carrying that particular edge men use when their convenience has been mildly inconvenienced. "I dropped my keys over there. Can you grab them?" I kept working, focused on the trash can I was emptying, the deliberate rhythm of routine maintenance that keeps spaces functional while other people pursue their important thoughts. "Hey, louder now," with the irritation of someone unused to being anything other than immediately accommodated. "Keys, right there by your feet." I looked up, made eye contact for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to confirm I'd heard him, not long enough to suggest compliance was forthcoming. Then I returned to my work. The silence that followed carried a different weight than his usual territorial conquests. This wasn't about space or noise or convenience anymore. This was about the fundamental question of who had the right to expect service from whom. He walked over and retrieved the keys himself, jaw tight with the kind of frustration that comes from realizing your assumptions about power dynamics might need adjustment. But he didn't adjust, he doubled down. The next week, he started treating me like his personal maintenance staff. Gesturing towards spilled coffee, he expected me to clean, pointing out overflowing trash cans during his work sessions like I was some kind of environmental butler, making loud comments about service quality when other people were around, designed to establish hierarchy through public humiliation. I documented everything, photos with timestamps, detailed logs of interactions, security footage from cameras I'd helped install during routine maintenance upgrades. A comprehensive record of behavior that violated at least 7 different clauses in his facilities usage agreement. But more than that, I'd been documenting the impact. The students who stopped using the space, the staff who started taking longer routes to avoid walking past his claimed territory, the gradual erosion of the collaborative atmosphere that made these outdoor work areas special in the first place. By week 6, I had enough evidence to end his access permanently. By week 8, I had enough to involve campus security. By week 10, I had enough to trigger the kind of institutional review that follows people through academic networks and professional references. I still waited, because the perfect moment requires the perfect audience. Friday afternoon, 2 weeks before graduation, the quarterly facilities inspection that brings together department heads, major donors, and board members who want to see their investment in campus infrastructure actually functioning. He was there, of course. Spread across his usual territory during the busy lunch period, laptop and papers claiming space for 6 people, while actual students ate their sandwiches standing up or took their food elsewhere. Phone conversation loud enough to disrupt 3 separate study groups. Personal music playing from wireless speakers that violated at least 2 different noise ordinances. The inspection team arrived at 1:15. Donors who'd funded the outdoor workspace renovation project. Board members who'd approved the policies governing shared facility usage. Department heads responsible for ensuring those policies were enforced consistently and fairly. I was cleaning tables nearby when they started discussing the success of the Collaborative Workspace Initiative. How well the space was serving its intended function. Whether the investment in premium outdoor facilities was generating the kind of student satisfaction and academic productivity they'd hoped for. That's when he decided to establish his authority with an audience present. "Excuse me," he called across the space, voice pitched for maximum audibility. "Can you do something about the trash situation over here? It's getting a little ridiculous." The inspection team turned to look. Donors and board members and department heads suddenly focused on this interaction between facilities user and maintenance staff. I walked over with my equipment, made eye contact, spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I'll need to see your current facilities access authorization for premium workspace areas." The confusion on his face was immediate and profound, like someone who'd just been asked to prove they owned their own car. "What are you talking about? I work here." Premium outdoor workspace areas require current authorization for extended use during peak hours. I'll need to verify your access status before I can accommodate special requests. I pulled out the tablet every maintenance worker carries for work orders and facility reports, opened the facilities management system, entered his name into the search field while the inspection team watched with growing interest. "According to current records, your authorization for premium workspace access was revoked 3 weeks ago due to multiple policy violations, documented between March and April." The silence that followed was the sound of social capital evaporating in real time. "You should have received notification by email and regular mail. Your standard campus access remains valid for general academic buildings and basic outdoor seating areas." I turned to address the inspection team directly, voice professional and matter of fact. "This individual has been using premium facilities without authorization for approximately 21 days. Multiple students and staff have filed complaints about disruptive behavior and territorial occupation of shared resources. Security footage confirms pattern violations of noise policies, space allocation guidelines, and collaborative workspace etiquette standards." The lead donor, a woman whose foundation had funded the entire outdoor workspace project, stepped forward. "Are you saying this person has been monopolizing facilities that were designed for collaborative student use? Yes, ma'am. The violation log includes approximately 40 documented incidents of behavior that conflicts with the community standards requirement for premium access authorization. I handed her the tablet showing the comprehensive record I'd been building for 10 weeks. Photos, timestamps, impact documentation, witness reports from students and staff who'd been afraid to complain officially. The board member responsible for facilities oversight looked at the evidence, then at him, then back at the evidence. Sir, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and vacate this area immediately. Campus security will contact you regarding the formal review process for unauthorized facility usage. No yelling, no drama, no personal conflict. Just institutional authority functioning exactly as designed, with consequences arriving through proper channels at exactly the moment when the right people were present to witness both the violation and the enforcement. He left, packed his laptop and papers and overpriced coffee cup, and walked away while donors and board members and department heads watched him go. The space exhaled. Students who'd been hovering at the edges moved back to the tables that were supposed to be theirs. Conversation returned to normal volumes. The collaborative atmosphere reasserted itself, like water flowing back into a space after an obstruction is removed. I resumed my routine, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces, and maintaining the infrastructure that makes intellectual pursuits possible. The inspection team continued their tour, but I heard the lead donor mention something about excellent enforcement of community standards and ensuring access equity for all students. 2 weeks later, graduation came and went. New students arrived for summer sessions. The outdoor workspaces filled with fresh faces who had no idea that their access to premium collaborative areas had been preserved through the quiet application of institutional authority. I still work the early morning shift, still move through campus in steel-toed boots and utility shirts, invisible to people who think power announces itself with titles and business cards. But I understand something now that I didn't understand 18 months ago. Real power doesn't perform. It waits, it documents, it builds relationships and understanding and evidence until the moment when action becomes inevitable and resistance becomes impossible. The mistake wasn't throwing me the keys. The mistake was forgetting that in institutional settings, the person who controls access controls everything else. Some mornings I walk past the outdoor workspace areas during the busy periods. Students spread across tables in productive collaboration, voices blended in the kind of intellectual community those spaces were designed to foster. No one person claiming territory that belongs to everyone. No disruption of the careful balance that makes shared resources actually work. Power doesn't announce itself, it just makes sure things function the way they're supposed to function. And sometimes when entitled children forget that their comfort depends on other people's labor and consideration and quiet enforcement of standards, power reminds them, gently, professionally, permanently, the way it should be.